Greetings! I am Tandas Naravan Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. Today it's time to get back into our discussion on Shadowrun. I'm going to continue talking about different things in Shadowrun and introduce you some things. Today I actually want to go over two things. I'm going to start talking to you about some skills, but first I want to talk to you about archetypes. Now, archetypes are something you don't have to use at all. You don't even have to look at it all. You can make whatever character you want in Shadowrun according to the basic rules, just building it off of your attributes and your skills to build a character. But what an archetype would do is it gives you an idea of the types of characters that are out there, the types of Shadowrunners that are out there, so what kind of role your character may fill. Now, every edition of the book has come out with their own list of archetypes. Many of them do repeat or have very big similarity, or have similarities in between them. But you can look to these as examples, and they have different generations. In 4th edition, for example, they would have hackers, while in 1st edition, they would have deckers. That's a big difference. It's the difference between the technology in that time period and this time period, because every edition is supposed to be years in the future from the last one. So if you want to use an archetype, look to what it is, and look at this. It gives an example of a character in the book. These are the examples of the archetype. Now, you can take that example as much as you want. For example, the face. The face, you can either choose to have it built in a couple of different ways. You could be a face based solely upon skills, that you put your skills to be very high, very good at negotiation, charisma-based things. You have very high charisma. On the other hand, you can take a lot of things like BioWare, give enhancements to social situations. There are a bunch of them that do. So you could take a bunch of these BioWare and use those. So you're spending a lot more money and focusing more on that too. So you could also have a lot of BioWare. Or you could do something like be a magician or an adept and try to take this role. A magician with a small magic, but a number of spells which affect them in social situations might be very useful as the face. On the other hand, an adept, there are a few powers that would affect and enhance your ability to negotiate. You could be that. You could use these adept powers, and that way you could be a face using them. So as you can see, there are a lot of options for being the face. Like, some of them are a little less option heavy. Like being a street samurai implies you're probably going to use a lot of cyberware. That's the entire idea behind them, as a warrior on the streets using a lot of cyberware, traditionally with some melee and guns. Though that is a little more set in stone of how you want to do it, but if you're going to be sort of the street samurai archetype, your amount of cyberware you'll use is entirely up to you. You could have a very minimalistic, but fill up the same sort of role as the sort of tank of the group. That would be a good description for of a street samurai, be sort of the group tank more. Or you can be sort of like a gang thug, which would be very tanky, less sort of like enhanced and combat-based with weapons, and more like up damage absorption, attraction of the enemy. Any of the archetypes and how you use them is up to you. Again, these are only little templates, little ideas of how you want to build a character and what kind of roles you want to aim for. And there are so many different roles, and the amount that is actually needed is non-existent, because you can choose anything for your character. Your character could fill a few different roles. You could be that you are a street samurai, but you took enough charisma and a few skills that you could function on the face. Maybe not the greatest face there would be, but if no one else is even thinking about sort of being under that archetype, you could do the job for the group. So that might be a good suggestion to do, is also sort of fish around with the other players and see what kind of archetypes they might be taking, what other kind of ideas they're floating around, so that all of you can work together to make a fairly cohesive team. You don't need to do that. You can all make your own characters and see how they work together, and the system allows for enough leeway that you could have a team of all street samurais and still get missions done. You would just take missions appropriate to that. You wouldn't take missions which you need a hacker if no one is a hacker on the team. You would take missions that you would need a lot more brute force. You can do that. It's perfectly fine, and your game master should change the game according to that, should give you missions according to whatever team you have. So let's get into talking about skills. Now, the book lists having a skill from rank 0 to 7, or having no rank in a skill whatsoever. It gives you sort of the skill groups, and it will tell you examples of what that means. This is a very good chart to look at and get an idea of what it means to have a rank in that skill. Now, 7, you need a quality to get that, and 0, in non-existent, you would also need a quality to have. Non-existent means you just wouldn't know about it at all. It'd be like, I'd be living in a cave my entire life and I have no idea what driving is. On the other hand, 7 would be like the greatest expert you could ever be, far beyond anybody that would ever exist, like the most, like an Evel Knievel sort of like car driver. that would do awesome tricks and stunts and things like that and be great at it. 0 to 6 is going to be your normal rating. Let's talk about having 0. If you have a 0 in a skill and still want to roll it, there are sometimes you can. It's called defaulting. You would subtract 1 dice and you'd use whatever attribute is proper to it. So if it's a dex-based skill check and I don't have that skill, I can roll 1 less dice than my normal dexterity would be, and I can just check that, basically roll that that defaulted skill and see if I have success. Now there is certain skills that you cannot roll. Just like there's certain skills you cannot take unless you are a magician or a technomancer. Or there are certain skills that you cannot default on. It will mention under the skill whether or not you can default on it. It will let you know. Getting into that, when you're looking in the book, looking at all the skills, it will tell you the skill. It will tell you the attribute that it's linked to. It will tell you whether or not you can default on it. And it will give you examples of specializations should you choose a specialization in that skill. Now there are big charts which break up skill groups and linked attributes. It will tell you an attribute and it will tell you all the skills linked to it. And for the skill groups, it will tell you all the different skill groups and it will tell you which skills are in them. Now that is another thing I just did not mention, that skills will also mention what skill group they are. So if you're looking at the listing of the skill group, it's going to be attribute, skill group, default or not, and specializations before giving a description of it. Now, for a lot of these rules, it will give generalization for using these skills. It just doesn't describe it here. It will talk to you about using, like it will talk to you about using climbing. Climbing is an extended test. It will give you the basic rules for it. Or it gives you the rules for jumping. It gives you the rules for perception and many of its modifiers in the book. There are different groups of skills in the book, and they're divided up into combat, physical, magical, social, technical, and vehicle. Each of these groups of skills, which is a different kind of skill group, they're more like divided up into categories of skills that are very similar. Like if you're in the combat group, it's only going to talk about skills which are used in combat. The physical ones are ones based upon your physical attributes that you would use. And that would you use very, like, moving around. That would be the climbing, the jumping, and such. Certain ones in the physical group are ones that are affected by the physical world, like perception is put into this one. A very important group they do talk about is, of course, the social one. They're all charisma-based. And it will give you the rules of social situations when to use these charisma skills, and it gives you a whole list of modifiers. It gives you general modifiers to any of them, and it gives specifics to whatever charisma-based skill you're trying to use. And these are very important. These are going to come up at different points in time, and someone is probably going to need to roll them at some point. Most Shadowrun games deal with things like making deals when negotiating your jobs. So you're going to want at least to know a little bit about this chart, because, you know, negotiating for a deal for a job, or maybe trying to make a new contact, or maybe, you know, there comes to a point in time where you have to negotiate with someone for whatever reason because you've gotten in trouble, and negotiation might get you out of that trouble. It's a good thing to have at least some knowledge of, and one player to at least have a little bit of use of. Granted, again, you don't necessarily need to do it. You can go through an entire Shadowrun game where there are no social interactions, where you're very just brute forcing it in. It's just that it's going to end up that it's going to be harder on the players, not impossible, and it's up to your game master to, of course, balance it out that it's not impossible for you. It's just, again, it's a more of a challenge sort of game. It's not fine to do. It's fine to have it that you will have that kind of challenge. It might be fun. Now, the last thing I wanted to talk about today is special skills. Special skills are skills that you and your game master make up, because this list of skills, it's pretty comprehensive. It doesn't have everything. There might be a skill you can come up with that you would want to do that would be one that would have a big upper grouping, one that you could define a few specializations in, that you want to have because you think it would be important to your character and you could use it in game. You can discuss that with your game master, and you could come up with that and invent one together. You choose an attribute, you choose if it would be in a skill group, all those kind of things, all these kind of definitions. You can make it up yourself. Again, this is all with your game master, with their approval, with them working with you closely to make up this. But again, it's entirely up to you to make up a skill as necessary to your character, as you think it is necessary to your character. So that's all I wanted to talk about today. I've gone over some basics of archetypes and what you would use them for. Using them for examples for your characters more than actually taking them on directly. And of course I've gone over some of the basics of skills, of using them and understanding them a little more. If you have any questions, comments, anything you think I missed, please leave it in the comments below. Please leave a like if you enjoyed this video. It shows your support for the channel and the Empire. Please also subscribe if you haven't already. We're always looking for more citizens, more members. If you know anybody that'd be interested in this video or learn anything from it, please share it. And until the next time, I bid you farewell.